Venezuelan Foreign Minister. Mr. Speaker and colleagues, the statement to which I refer is entitled "Venezuela Ratifies Its Rights over the Essequibo at the United Nations," and it will be circulated to the honourable members of this House. That statement is yet another example of Venezuela's time-worn belief that falsehoods repeated often enough may eventually lose their basic falsity. They do not. Venezuela has no rights over the Essequibo. Guyana's rights, on the other hand, over the Essequibo were settled by the award of 1899 of the International Tribunal of Arbitration established under the Treaty of Washington of 1897, whose decision the government of Venezuela undertook to accept, and I quote, as a full, perfect, and final settlement of all the questions referred to the arbitrators. And Venezuela did accept the decision, jointly with the United Kingdom, demarcating the boundary on the ground and drawing up a definitive map depicting the boundary between British Guyana and Venezuela, identifying the Essequibo as being within British Guyana, in accordance with the 1899 arbitral award. But there were always in Venezuela elements who wanted more, and for whom the birth of an independent Guyana seemed to end their imperialist crusade. So they tried to prevent it, contending with Britain that the arbitral award of 1899 was null and void. Britain resisted them, their final rejection being the Geneva Agreement of 1966, which acknowledged that Guyana would be free and ensured that Venezuela could not pursue its nullity contention against the new state, save in specified ways, starting with a mixed commission and empowering the United Nations Secretary General to bring the contention to finality by judicial settlement, consonant with the Charter of the United Nations. From the outset, Venezuela delayed pursuing their nullity contention, pursuing instead a policy of harassment of the new state, impeding its development by threatening investors. It kept Guyana out of the OAS for 25 years. Contemptuous of international law, it has issued decrees asserting maritime claims progressively more and more outrageous. And it remains one of the few countries of the world to have excluded itself from the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea. And now, in the statement to which I have referred, Venezuela seeks to move away from its nullity contention and to imply that the Geneva Agreement is about, and I quote, a historical position, end of quote, and, I quote again, a territorial controversy, end of quote, and to embrace the agreement as it attempts to rewrite it. To embrace the agreement even as it attempts to rewrite it. Guyana totally rejects these backhanded attempts to despoil Guyana of her rights. Guyana accepts the Geneva Agreement for what it is. It is not surprised that Venezuela accepts it as it would wish it to be. When on the 4th of April 1966, the United Nations Secretary General, then His Excellency U Thant, acknowledged receipt of the Geneva Agreement, he responded, and I quote, I have made note of the obligations that eventually can fall on the Secretary General of the United Nations by virtue of paragraph 2 of Article 4 of the agreement. And it pleases me to inform that the functions are of such a nature that they can be appropriately carried out by the Secretary General of the United Nations. End of quotes. Last year, Guyana's President, His Excellency David Greendige, called on the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, to have Venezuela's contention that the arbitral award of 1899 is null and void and settled with finality by the judicial process. By the Geneva Agreement, both Guyana and Venezuela have empowered him to do so. Venezuela's behavior towards Guyana is a festering wound to peace and development in our region, and an affront to the rule of law in the world. It must be healed by a process of law. As honorable members are aware, the UN Secretary General has had discussions with both Guyana and Venezuela and has made proposals for, and I quote, the way forward, end of quote. Guyana has been cooperating with him and will continue to do so. Venezuela, however, seems prepared to derail the process. In this 50th anniversary of the Geneva Agreement, which was signed on February the 17th, 1966, Venezuela should be seeking to fulfill the objectives of that agreement and not frustrate them under a cloak of righteousness. Guyana will not allow the deceptions being peddled by Venezuela to persist. The people of Venezuela are our sisters and brothers, and Guyana has always held out the hand of friendship to them and continues to do so. But there are forces in Venezuela who made it their life's mission, abusing the hallowed memory of Bolivar, to hold Guyana hostage to their crusade of greed. Guyana is a child of decolonization. Its ancestry lies in the Charter of the United Nations, its purposes and principles. Guyana's sovereignty and territorial integrity are its international heritage. We will remain faithful to the demands of both, and we look to the international community to stand with us in Venezuela's assaults upon them. Mr. Speaker, it is my hope that the National Assembly will lend its full support to my statement as we continue in our collective endeavor to defend Guyana's sovereignty and territorial integrity. This statement will be brought to the attention of the Secretary General of the United Nations, the members of the Security Council, and the wider membership of the United Nations. I thank you.